Well, it really is striking how prominent India has become on the global stage, certainly in terms of geopolitics, but also as an economic player and increasingly as a prominent participant in global technology related matters. And indeed, it's making huge progress in its science and tech and its space program. But I think it's important not to look at this in a vacuum, right? I mean, this did not come out of nowhere, and it would not be correct to say that, very recently, the U.S. and other Western partners concluded that India has to be a key partner in efforts to counter China, and so that's why it's all of a sudden front and center on all of these global debates. It goes a lot further than that. I think we need to realize that this is a really a growth story for India that really began in the early 90s when India was facing a severe economic crisis and it decided to implement some very politically risky but economically necessary reforms, liberalization reforms. And that put itself on a path where it was essentially opening up to the world economically. And that led to, it really set it on this path to become what it is today. And that is a key source of trade, of investment, and so on. So I think that if you're trying to find where its global rise began, so to speak, at least in the modern era, you have to look at what happened in the early 90s. So its economy has really driven its growth to a large degree, even as it's continued to face significant economic stress at home, including significant levels of unemployment and severe levels of poverty in some areas of the country. That continues today. So I think that the broader story of India's growth and prominence, it's not new. It's been in place for several decades. But indeed, I would argue that it's only since the West competition with China, and especially the U.S. competition with China, heated up, only since that began, which has, been the last 5-6 years, has India taken on a more prominent geopolitical role, for sure. But I would argue that it's India's perceptions that the world has of India as an investment partner, as a trade partner. That's what I think looms larger than its perception, which is mainly harbored in the West, of India as a key partner to counter China. I think it's that first perception that looms large, because this is why so many countries around the world, regardless of their relationship with China, they want to do business with India. They want to work with it. They want to engage with it. And that, I think, is an important backdrop to look at how things have come. And final point on this, I think it's important to emphasize how India's desire to become a bigger part of what it views as a increasingly multilateral, multipolar world, that has really helped propel India's global role as well. I mean, you look at what the various forums that it's a part of today, the G20, right, the BRICS, AIIB, Shanghai Cooperation Forum. Some of these groups have been around for a while. Some are relatively new. Some are dominated by the developing world. Some dominated by the developed world. India is a part of all of these because it wants to be, and it's led to a situation where it's been able to take on leadership roles. Of course, this year it's been the chair of the G20. It's been the chair of the SCO. And that has led to additional opportunities to convene and bring major leaders to India all the time, including, as you mentioned just before, Janet Yellen from the United States. So a lot of reasons why India is where it is today. But I really emphasize that it's its economic growth story that I think is really the single biggest factor for why it has become such a prominent player today. So, it's very clear that there is bipartisan support in Washington for the idea of India really being the preeminent player in South Asia to work with the U.S. to counter China. It makes the most sense from a strategic perspective on bipartisan levels, and I think it makes a lot of sense, quite frankly. I mean, India is the only country in South Asia that has a long-standing rivalry with China, right? I mean, most countries in South Asia, certainly Pakistan, especially Pakistan, but others as well, they want to have a good relationship with China, and there's significant levels of reliance on China. I would argue that most countries in South Asia are non-aligned, and they want to be balancers. They want to balance their relations between China and India, their relations between China and the United States. But India is different in that, like the United States, it has this fairly long-standing competition with China, which has become more of a rivalry than anything else. like the United States, India's relations with China have gotten much worse over the last few years, especially since the Ladakh crisis in 2020. And I think also considering India being such a large country with its large population, large size, a military that's modernizing very rapidly, though there's been a lot of problems with that military modernization as well. So I think that all the pieces really fit together from a U.S. perspective. That, in looking at the South Asia region, India is the logical country to partner with the U.S. in its effort to counter China's rise.